But that made me think of like, yeah, and I feel like
there's a lot of grunting happening tonight, please.
Britain, an ancient kingdom with legends of violence, cruelty, and torment in its blood. Join your hosts, Ross, John, and James, as they bravely tread where few would dare. Witness their journey into the horrific history of British horror. They are the General Witchfinders.
Ladies and gentlemen, goblins and ghouls, welcome to the 8th episode of the General Witchfinders podcast. I'm James in Bournemouth on the south coast of England.
I'm John Pountney in South Wales, which is in the south of Wales.
I'm Ross in Dorchester in southern England. In today's episode, we are covering Jeremy Dyson's collection of short stories called Never Trust a Rabbit.
Jeremy Dyson is the co-creator of the West End play Ghost Stories and a member of the sketch comedy team, The League of Gentlemen. The League initially began as a stage act in 1995, which was then transferred to BBC Radio 4 in 1997 as On the Town with The League of Gentlemen, and then became a television series on BBC 2 in 1999. Dyson has written several books, including a novel, What Happens Now, published in 2006, nominated for the Goss First Novel Award, and enthusiastically reviewed by Ross after a bottle of wine in episode 5. He wrote Bright Darkness, The Lost Art of the Supernatural Horror Film, a non-fiction guide to horror films, and 3 collections of short stories entitled Never Trust a Rabbit, published in the year 2000, and shortlisted for the Macmillan Silver Pen Award. The Cranes That Build Cranes, which won the 2010 Edge Hill Award, as well as The Haunted Book, which Wikipedia seems to not know about, so we don't have any information on any awards, but it does have a very nice augmented reality cover. 5 stories from Never Trust a Rabbit were read on BBC 4 in the year 2000. Only one of which we've managed to find a link for. See the show notes for details about this. And tonight we are mainly going to talk about the following stories: We Who Walk Through Walls, A Slate Roof in the Rain, and Love in the Time of Molyneux. Now, all of these stories in this book have got a twist in the tale, and we highly, highly recommend that you get hold of a copy and read for yourself before you listen any further, because we will inevitably be cue various alarms and impact sound effects. We will be dropping some spoilers as we chat.
I've been thinking about this quite a lot over the last
On the toilet.
couple of weeks whilst I've been reading this, yes, but I was mainly on the toilet.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I feel quite weird about reviewing something where the people are still alive and potentially might listen to what we say about it, because everything we've done up to now has been very much in the past, and we've been able to
Melvin Hayes is still alive, Ross.
Yeah. I'm sure he's not active on Twitter, is he? Jeremy Dyson, he's been very nice to us. He's
wonderful.
And also I think everyone in the League of Gentlemen, I've spoken to a couple of them on Twitter in the past, and they've all been really lovely people. Jamie Dyson's answered me a couple of times on that.
I have photographed Mark Gatiss in character as Dracula.
Were you in character as Dracula, or was Mark Gatiss in character as Dracula, John?
He was doing Dracula for Big Finish, I think in 2016, in a studio in London. He's a very nice man, but I don't, I'm not a big fan of Jeremy Dyson, what he did over Brexit and taking his Hoovers to Thailand. I think that's disgusting.
But that's not saying I haven't got anything bad to say about this. I just feel a little bit weird about talking about someone who's alive and potentially, if they're really, really, really fucking bored, might listen to this.
That's fine, because I have something bad to say, so that's great.
Wow, okay, because I was going to say, for me, this was one of my recommendations, and this is something that I really love. So for the first time in doing this podcast, I'm not coming at it with a slightly raised eyebrow. And I'm very much going to be arguing its corner. So,
okay, well, maybe James, you kick off then. Tell us about why do you love this, and what was it about it that made you want to?
Why do you love this, James?
Why? Explain yourself, man. Right. And so, first of all, I feel I should point out that, weirdly enough, I was present at the first recording of On the Town with the League of Gentlemen. My sister, in the late 90s, was the other half of a guy who is now a very well-established comedy writer, a guy called Kevin Cecil. He was one of the writers on Veep.
Okay, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So, he's ended up doing that. And his comedy writing partner was Andy Riley, the guy who used to do the Bunny Suicides books, which were hugely, hugely popular in the early noughties. And back when I was working in it, massively popular job.
I've literally never heard of any of these people or these things. I think this sets out our store in terms of the fact that I only know about dead male British actors. And I literally know nothing about anything post 1996. Even myself. Yeah.
Okay, good. But still, as a result, he kind of moved in sort of quite rarefied comedy circles, which kind of led to me getting a job working at the Edinburgh Festival, where I worked for Mel and Sue, of course.
Oh, I remember this.
And that's when James came back from the Edinburgh Festival wearing a leather jacket and drinking Jack Daniels and Coke. It was just like, he changed over that summer.
That's right, I got cool.
And wearing rings as well.
I came back like the Fonz. Yeah. Edgy. As a consequence, I was then living in London. I was an undergraduate and also postgraduate. When I lived in London. And so my sister said to me, do you want to come and see a recording of a BBC Radio 4 comedy show tonight? Kevin's got tickets. So I was like, yeah, sure. And it turns out it was the League of Gentlemen. And it was the first time that they ever... So I always feel like that was kind of not comedy history so much, but hey, I was there for that. But so that's my kind of League of Gentlemen link. But then... What happened was I was working in a bookshop in the early noughties as well, while being a very, very impecunious postgraduate student. And Never Trust the Rabbit was a book that came in. And of course, I was aware of Jeremy Dyson's name. And at that point, he was established as the member of the League of Gentlemen that you didn't see. And I believe they play on this in the film, don't they, Ross?
Yeah, he's played by Michael Sheen in the film.
There you go, right? You see, so the whole thing of, yeah.
I photographed Michael Sheen as well.
Yeah, every time we see Michael Sheen, we think it's you, John.
I'll give you my thoughts about Michael Sheen off air.
Okay.
Oh, can't wait for that. That is going to be good.
But I have seen him having a piss.
Right. So back in the early, back in the turn of the millennium, though. So I'm working in this bookshop. And I was aware of who Jeremy Dyson was as a result of League of Gentlemen. And I thought, oh, wow, okay, he's got a book of short stories out. And the best thing was at the time, when I worked at this bookshop, you got 30% discount off of books.
Give over.
Yeah, it was great. Borders, by the way. No wonder they went to the wall. Before Amazon sucked the life of the marrow out of them. It was great for a little while working there. So, if there was anything you were mildly tempted by, you're always like, oh, wow, brilliant. It's only going to be a couple of quid. So I picked this short story up, and for me, on the front cover of my edition, there's a review from Adam Mars-Jones in The Observer, and the pull quote says, his stories nestle in that little vacant chink between Roald Dahl and Bourges. And for me, that was kind of, well, that's right up my route. I really love Jean-Louis Bourges' short stories. I was really into those at the time, as well, being a sort of philosophy person and really liking those kind of philosophical ideas. And of course, I really like I'm also a big fan of J.G. Ballard, I think we've mentioned before, and I love his short stories. So I'm always well inclined towards a well-written short story. And when I started reading them, straight away, first one, we'll talk about it in a minute, but We Who Walk Through Walls, and straight away it grabbed me. I was like, this is brilliant. I loved it. Didn't see the twist at the end coming at all, and just thought, really? Oh, this is the business. This is fantastic. And I just smashed through them all. Yeah. Really, really enjoyed it.
Have you read it again since the year 2000? Okay, that's interesting. Because I can remember really loving this when I first read it, but I haven't read it since that time. There was only two stories which were stuck in my mind. That was the first one, We Who Walk Through Walls, and the 250,000 electrical clearance. That was the other one that was stuck in my mind.
Yeah.
It was very interesting going back and reading it. So I don't know, have you guys only read the three stories we're covering tonight, John? Have you only read those three?
Yes, I've only read those three.
Okay. So I've read the whole pretty much the whole book since then, and it does feel. It was great, and I really still did enjoy it, but it did feel very like late 90s.
Really?
Yeah, it felt very late 90s to me.
Okay.
Yeah. Should we jump into the first story then? Again,
yes.
Spoilers. So
feet first.
So who wants to go through what the plot is?
Well, we're introduced to a person who's just Johnson. We're told that he's being followed, and these people who follow him say, "Oh, it's interesting. Interesting accent. Where are you from?" And he says, "Oh, kind of Eastern Europe." And they say, "Look, we would like to offer you a job. There's something that we want you to do." And and he's like, "Okay, then what's that?" And then he then says, we need you to work for Torpedo." And he says, "Well, who's Torpedo?" He says, "Oh, surely you must have heard of Torpedo." And for all intents and purposes, he's like either David Blaine or, depending on your mileage, David Copperfield as well. So he's a large, big event magician. And we're told that he's an absolute ringer for Torpedo. He looks...
Paul Daniels as well.
Yeah, exactly that. And
Martin Daniels.
And, well, I was going to talk about, in a minute, like an event magician, and I was going to talk about how, like, event magic on TV when we were growing up, and how, even though I remember David Copperfield is supposed to walk through the Great Wall of China, and he's supposed to have made the Statue of Liberty disappear, both of which are things I can only vaguely remember. I can remember absolutely everything about when Paul Daniels was in the Iron Maiden, and everyone thought he was
and we
dead.
thought he died. Yeah. That night, that was on Halloween. There was two of the most frightening things I've ever seen. It was Paul Daniels being trapped in the Iron Maiden and blood coming out of it, and Debbie McGee screaming for him to be let out, and then them cut into black. And then that was followed up by something about the Enfield Poltergeist, where they played the tapes of the ghosts, talking about uteruses.
Scarred for
and
life, literally.
Yeah,
Ross.
exactly. Yeah, absolutely terrifying that night.
Okay, here's the deal. Torpedo is going to do this stunt where he's going to walk through the wall of a cemetery, which was a scene from myth, in which a golem, which is a character primarily from sort of like the Hebrew tradition, when it's like a man just crafted from clay and given life to be an Avenger, not as in the Avengers Age of Ultron, but as in someone who
John doesn't know what that is, so don't worry about that.
Patrick McNee.
No, not one of those. The golem is seen as someone who will right a wrong, and kind of a person who delivers justice. Torpedo says to Johnson, "You look just like me, and here's how the trick's going to work. We're going to make it look like I'm going to appear on the other side of this wall, but of course, it isn't going to be. I'm not going to do this. It's going to be you on the other side. I'm going to go in one side. You're going to pop out the other. We look so alike. There you go. Everyone will be amazed. And the thing is, I'm going to pay you a large sum of money, but you've got to shut up and disappear. That's the conditions. That's the conditions of the trick."
Yeah, and then, pretty much he implies that if you say anything to anyone, I will have you killed because I am that powerful.
Yes, he is a huge celebrity. We're told that he's like a massive celebrity, and then we find out more about him, and we kind of go like his background and his past. He's from Liverpool, isn't he? We're told that he's from Liverpool originally, and things such as that. And we're also told kind of like only very kind of basic details about Johnson. And I will say at this point, this is something where I'm someone that I never try to kind of guess the end or the twist. I'm someone that likes to be caught up in the story and caught up in the moment. And I'm sure I'm not giving away any secrets here by saying Ross is the exact polar opposite of that. Ross loves from a second one of the story going, "Oh, I know what's going to happen. I know what's going to happen." And that constantly guessing. So I'd be interested to hear if, Ross, did you see it coming at all?
I had forgotten the twist, and I was completely blindsided by the fact that it was going to be some kind of supernatural being that did it. I had some kind of weird memory that he got trapped inside the wall, but that was it. So I didn't catch this coming at all. I've got to say that out of all of the ones I've read, this is the only one in my mind I could see being made. And I did cast Reece Shearsmith as the magician. So what about you, John? Did you see the twist coming?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
I'm an experienced hand at this, says John.
I just knew what was coming straight up from the beginning, that it was going to be some kind of... I didn't see the twist, but I knew it was going to be like not what it seemed. I just found it weird that a lot was implied, but then none of it was delivered. So you've got this kind of thing to do with Eastern Europe.
Yeah.
The lady that he sees in the cafe at the start who kind of identifies something in him.
Yeah.
Yeah. She recognises it. Yeah.
Then none of that is delivered on. Or it's so vague that you just think, I don't really understand why that's part of it.
Do you think she recognised that he wasn't human?
She recognises
Right.
that he's a golem. Yeah.
Oh, that's what he's meant to be, is it?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, right. Oh, right. I thought he was an angel or something.
No. So and here we go into spoiler territory. It turns out that Johnson is the golem from the cemetery. And
I
basically
see.
He's taken the form of Trapedo.
Rapido.
To catch Trapedo out and to punish him.
Yeah.
See, maybe if I knew what was happening in the story, I would have enjoyed it.
Johnson inhaled deeply, then said, "Forgive me for having taken a form so similar to yours, but we felt it the surest way to get you." He smiled broadly before adding, "Incidentally, I can do this as well." He plunged his hand into Trapedo's chest. It passed through the skin, muscle, and bone as if they were soft cheese. Trapedo looked down, finally speechless. He felt Johnson tickle his heart. Johnson shook his head, then withdrew his hand. There was no wound. The white satin of Trapedo's shirt was unblemished. "Not that way, don't worry," said Johnson, who then took the shivering conjurer in his arms.
Shivering. Shiver me timbers, it's harder than it looks.
"You left us no choice. You cheapen wonder. You defame it, using it for your own ends. You don't add to it. Magic is all. Magic is this world. It does not lie in your tatty mummery, but in every flower, every stone, every sod of earth, if you would only stop and think. However, I'm afraid that time has passed."
Well, I'm here to be convinced by you two. I'm not sure I have been yet. In my mind, it was a bit of a Randall and Hopkirk kind of thing. I don't know why, where I just saw the other guy in a white suit and I thought he was an angel or something. I didn't really, I didn't get the golem thing at all. I have been in that cemetery though.
Have you? Okay.
In Prague, I've been in the Jewish cemetery. It's absolutely crazy. It's a tiny, tiny bit of land, just piled with tombstones. It's insane. I think we went in 2005, so it's a long time since we went, but I know I've definitely been there. And it's a very, very evocative place. I can understand why, if Jeremy Dyson has been there, he wanted to write a short story about it. But I obviously totally missed all of the implications of the story.
It was an interesting one for them to open with. Reading the whole book, I feel like there's a mixture of very small, almost like internal stories where it's pretty much all within the person's mind, and it's all very small. It's all very much based in Leeds and quite inconsequential little things, whereas the first one breaks off, it's this international magician, intrigue of people being followed, it's going around the world and stuff. It was quite a big story to start off with. I enjoyed it, and I didn't see the ending coming even the second time I read it, but there was probably 20 years in between the first reading and the second one.
That's interesting.
So then go on, John.
Yeah, go on. No,
I was just going to say, but then that leads.
I'm eating a Mars bar.
Good choice. Then we come on to A Slate Roof in the Rain, and I thought that this was interesting for a number of reasons. First of all, I should point out that when Ross did read this one time, he sent me a message going, "This is you." This because I am a teacher. I'm not an art teacher, but I was like, "Oh, thanks, mate. Cheers." And we'll get on to I feel I should point that out for the listening public that that's what Ross thought. But also the reason why I thought, I'd be interested to see what John makes of this, because of course John is an artist, Ross has an artistic background, and this is the story where I think it's the supernatural quality of art. And that book that I read recently, The Apparition Phase, this kind of touches on that as well, wherein it's that whole idea of when you create something, you give it life. As an artist, when you create something, you're kind of bringing it, you're giving it an existence, and it comes into a plane. And once it's out there, you're no longer in control of it. And that, for me, is what I picked up from this story. That sometimes, someone can make art and put it out into the world, and it can have a dark and powerful force that you're no longer in control of.
And also, that control thing, it can be something which has a life of its own and often goes beyond the intent of the artist, because I think that this kid had no intention in what he created, but also I think there was a strong implication that something was moving through him. Because
I've had that sometimes, some awful things moving through me.
I think that is part of your inspiration, isn't it, John? You just got to squirt stuff out into the world. Yes.
There's no squirting happening.
In this story, it's all about a teacher, a long-established teacher in this school.
Art teacher Dickie Bo Dial, and it's a secondary school.
He's a long confirmed bachelor.
Mm-hmm.
It mentions that people have assumed that he's gay in the past, but
it's not true.
But he's very, very set in his ways. It seems happy in his life. However, I think that, like this and a couple of the other stories, that although people think they're happy, they're probably not. If they're being honest about some of the choices they've made in their lives. He wants to pick only the kids who are actually really good at art to come into his art class, but there's a young boy who's quite inept, quite socially awkward, quite from a bit of a shitty background, wants to come and join the art class, and he does everything he can to try and scupper this kid coming into the A-level class, and then when he does, he ends up producing this one...
a disturbing piece of art.
It's almost like comes through him, and he has no control over it, and the guy is so bitter and freaked out by the art, he actually dismisses it and actually makes the boy feel bad about producing this piece, and he ridicules it in front of the other students.
There was something bad about the picture. Not badly drawn or badly composed. It was neither of these. It was mostly black or very dark brown. The left third was dominated by a huge brooding owl, naturalistically rendered in coloured ink. It gazed out at Dial and looked at him in the eye. It was perched on a winter-stripped branch that spread out like crab's legs across the rest of the image. Behind the bird, some distance away in silhouette against the storm-soaked sky, was a dark, sprawling castle. The castle was surrounded by impenetrable woods, filling the space around it like thick old cobwebs. The strangest thought occurred to Dial as he stared at the image. If someone were to say, "You have to go to this place," he would fight and kick and scream and cry to avoid it. That's how the painting is described.
It did feel like the kind of description of a painting which you'd only find in a novel describing a painting.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so it's very sort of romanticised sort of idea of a spooky painting. But basically, what happens? It comes across that he enjoys visiting prostitutes. He finds some prostitute in some Eastern European country that he gets almost like purchased for a period of time. Goes out there. Turns out that the girl is actually, was it a dad or was it like a stepfather or something like that?
It's not fully, but it's
something quite creepy and horrible and seedy and scary happens, and the teacher gets killed by the boyfriend or the stepfather or the father of the prostitute, and then the last thing he sees is the picture from the boy's painting.
He has captured his final moment. That is his final vision.
Well, he sees the scene. He doesn't see the picture. He looks out. This was probably the one I enjoyed the most, in the way that it was so much like an episode of Tales of the Unexpected. I could actually hear the music at the start and the end. And it was introduced by Roald Dahl in a dressing gown. Beyond that, I don't know. I wasn't very taken with it, to be honest.
Okay.
But this is my favourite one. So I think this is my week where...
Basically, we've come too far away from 1972, haven't we?
Yeah.
No one was in flares.
We've submitted James to too many shit films. Yeah. And this is the opposite end of my comfort zone. I just felt like I could see the ending coming miles away. From the minute that the kid has done this painting, I know what the end of the story is, and it's going to be the man seeing the scene.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So really, it was just turning the pages to get to that point and then go, oh yeah.
When I read it, I wasn't kind of second guessing where it was going. I was just seeing how it unfolded. And again, I thought,
I don't know if my brain maybe
kind of very Tales of the Unexpected style, but I liked it. And as you said, the whole, as Ross said, this theme of people that have lived, they think they're happy, but in fact they've had an unfulfilled life, or they've made a dreadful, they've done something awful. Like I said, part of this kind of karmic punishment on Dial is due to the fact that the artist,
fatty something,
No. The artist, Bernard Sunset, what he does, as Ross says, he breaks his spirit. And we're told that he kind of produces, work of lessening quality.
But why is he called Bernard Sunset?
He said that was the only remarkable thing about him was
but
his name.
There's no kind of... Nobody's called Sunset. I just think there's kind of things dropped in that are kind of like... Well, the only remarkable thing about him was his name. And then you give him a name like Terence Washing Machine. It's like... That's remarkable because it's not a name. No one's surname is Sunset, and it's not like it isn't explained in the story then why he might be called Sunset. It's kind of dropped in and then just not developed.
You found it contrived.
Yeah, the overall arc of the story does make perfect sense, and in a way, it is a really good short story because it's this guy who's never really done anything with his life. He's had a pointless life. And then he just visits this prostitute, and then he dies. It's about him kind of ignoring the remarkable things that have happened to him. He's obviously ignored them, where he's had this girlfriend that, he couldn't commit to, and then she left him to someone else. And then obviously he's seen this painting that the kid's done, and rather than kind of applaud what the kid has done, he's just said, it's weird. Don't do it again. But I just think that the things I have issue with, like in the first story, are just the details that are dropped in, where I've got no frame of reference to kind of pin this to.
But did you find description of doing art A level evocative to you? Because it did make me feel it was strange that when I took art A level, it suddenly the way the art teachers behaved towards us was very different. It was there was like you can bring your records in and play it on the record player, and you spend the whole day in the art room, and it did feel like
it's not Mr. Johnson, it's Dave.
Yeah, exactly. I like that.
Call me Dave.
That memory of suddenly being treated like
an adult
by the art teacher, and being able to not go, okay, well, today we're going to be drawing this and you've got to do it a certain way. It was like, okay, you can express yourself.
Yes.
And maybe it's because I was one of the kids who could actually draw in that group where she was allowed to go away and do that sort of stuff. And that was one of the things that I liked out of this story, was that the memory of suddenly going to A-level art foundation, art school and stuff. Those are some of the happiest things I've ever done in my life.
It is a very nostalgic story, and I do think it gets that. Well, I don't know if it gets that because of when it was written or the way it's written. And like you said earlier, they do come across as very late 90s, early noughties stories with their references.
Yeah.
What it really reminded me of was actually when I was still in school, in Stratford High School, doing art. And not yet in college, because I did my A-levels and GCSEs in college. When I was in school, like we only had 2 hours of art a week or something insane like that. So for me, that was the only lesson where I really felt like I was doing anything that I wanted to do. And I can remember the art room now being a very strange, the whole school has been flattened since. So it was a very kind of odd 1930s building, but I did find that location kind of trigger that memory of making a life-size figure that was falling through a window out of copy decks and rubber gloves and stuff, and that's the kind of thing it reminded me of.
Yeah, the sort of weird shit that you got to do in it art A level.
But I think that's kind of what the story's about, isn't it? Like when you've created a piece of work, you're then not in control of the effect that it has on people. And that's a little bit what I think the painting is meant to be about, or a metaphor for. You release something into the world and then it becomes other people's work then, doesn't it? Especially what's something that you read, because you imagine that internally rather than, bring your kind of own frame of reference to a painting. When you read something, the book becomes your imagination, doesn't it? Because you imagine the images yourself rather than the writer kind of having any control over what that becomes.
I listened to an interview from Jeremy Dyson, him talking about writing this, and he said he was very surprised about what was coming out. And he was talking, he was saying that it was a really interesting exercise for him to see what actually scared him and what actually he was worried about and what he wanted to write about. and he was talking about the ego and the self, and just saying, the whole idea that what you think of yourself of who you are is such a small actual part of your actual self. And he was saying how that's why people can talk to you and reveal stuff about yourself, because they see other aspects of you which you're not aware of. And I felt like reading all of these stories, of so many of them, felt to me that they were about either the fear of not doing something when you should do something, or the fear of making a mistake in your life, which will fuck up your life forever, and you can't take it back. And it just did feel like the whole thing, like, if I was going to analyse them after reading this, was that you're very, very frightened about making any kind of decision. And it was, and I felt like that's probably something which someone who's just starting their career and has suddenly become very successful very quickly is probably quite concerned about. So like, I now suddenly got to a position where I can do pretty much anything I want, but making those decisions is either going to make or break my career. Yeah. In the other stories are it's pretty much all about relationships. It's like, do I tell someone I love them? Either you do that and it fucks something up, or you don't do that and it fucks something up. And that's something I can very much identify with. I've had 3
shits today.
No, similar romantic relationships in my life.
Louise Weiner.
Yes, exactly.
Louise Weiner and Beck.
And Beck, yeah. 2 of those, I had to sort of make the decision to say, I like you. The first one went really badly, and they didn't like me back. The second one, they did like me.
You are still friends with James, though.
Yeah, exactly.
Come on.
Second one was a relationship which lasted 10 years and then went wrong. And then the third relationship, it was someone with my wife. She told me she was the one who was brave enough to say, I want to be in a relationship with you. And it's just, and those are just 3 decisions on someone's life which make a massive impact, don't they? And they are a big deal. That who do you decide that is the person I want to be with, or I don't want to be with? And that whole kind of fear of what the impact that's going to have on your whole life. Reading this book now as a 43-year-old man who's in a committed 15-year relationship with 2 children and about to buy my 3rd house or whatever, and all that kind of stuff. I don't have that fear anymore, and it's almost like this book doesn't have the same impact it had for me when I was in my 20s.
It's a young man's book.
It's a very young man's book, I think. As in, it's a book which is very for young men and by young men.
I think it's about someone who's about to make a lot of big decisions in their life and is frightened of them, whereas...
It really reminded me of a couple of Paul Cornell's Doctor Who New Adventure novels, which are pretty much about the same pop culture references. One of the Time Worm ones, which I can't even remember which one it is now, it might be Revelation. Like Ian Brown is mentioned, I think Brett Anderson is mentioned. Really 90s references about being a teenager going into like
Select magazine.
Oh Jesus! Don't bring it back. No, but do bring it back. But don't bring it back.
Stone Roses are mentioned in this book on another story.
Yeah, Stone Roses are mentioned in Love in the Time of Molyneux.
Yes.
Maybe I'm seeing it more through your eyes now, and probably thinking it's slightly better than I thought, but. It wasn't for me at all.
That's right.
That story particularly, I could almost see shot on film and being on ITV 7:30 on a Wednesday night, but with a slightly less racy ending.
Well, that was one thing. I felt like there was a huge amount of sex in this book, and almost as a younger guy, and this goes back to reading things like The Rats. I would have found some of that stuff either like titillating or not seeing it as an issue. Whereas looking at this as an older child, I'm just like,
sex. I read it as being a bit like, I don't want to read what someone else has written about that they find sexy. Yeah. That's literally the last thing I want to read about.
Do you think that nowadays, because sexual imagery is so much more
ubiquitous
and accessible, that it doesn't have to leak into other culture? So I feel like there was always erotic thrillers around. There was always sex in books. There was always something a little bit racy in there because you couldn't get it anywhere else.
Potentially, yes. I mean, my favourite, as we know, mentioned in every episode of this podcast, my favourite writer is probably M.R. James, and there is literally zero sex of any kind in any of his. Besides what some people see as being like a homosexual subtext, there is nothing. There's no romances. There's hardly any. I mean, I think there's like one romance in all of his stories, and I prefer it that way. Yeah, I'd rather just know about the ghosts and digging up the curse rather than like
tits.
The next story we're going to talk about in the time of Molyneux has the sexy girl in it.
That's right.
But I can't find her sexy because I know it's what another man has imagined being sexy, and that I just find that slightly distasteful. I don't know why. Just thought it was a bit weird.
Are we ready to jump on to the next one?
Bit of a Freudian slip there.
Right. Okay. So this is the one that whenever I'm telling people about this short story collection, this is the one that's always stayed with me because I think it's such a fantastic conceit. Now, the general plot and principle of it is a man finds out that his flatmate, his very popular and very successful flatmate, is the second coming of Christ. And now, a number of people have kind of touched on this story before, this idea of, what if there was a second coming of Christ in the modern age? I remember, do you remember Russell T. Davies had
I was going to say Christopher Eccleston.
Yeah, second coming.
That's right.
No.
It literally called The Second Coming.
The Stone Roses, second album.
And that as well, yeah. But this was one that I really liked just because of the kind of the short and, the other one that's always really stuck with me as well is from Michael Chabon's The Yiddish Policeman's Union, which is another book which I highly, highly recommend. It's an alternative universe novel, and it's set in a world where kind of they got the Jews out of Europe before the worst of the Holocaust happened. Okay. And they kind of established a Jewish state in Alaska.
Well, I do have that book, but I've never read it, so I need to read that.
The whole purpose and pitch of it is that you find out that this chess prodigy, this former chess prodigy, has been murdered. Back to Love in the Time of Molyneux in a minute. And then you find out that, in fact, he was the second coming.
Oh,
he was the second. But then the great twist of it all is you find out there's loads. There's been loads of second comings. The whole point is hardly anyone can handle the responsibility. It's such an overwhelming responsibility. It freaks out.
It's kind of implied in this story now that it feels like there might be another one that comes along because this one failed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's what's cool about it. So again, an idea that I just absolutely loved straight away. So you find out that he said the eponymous Molyneux is the second coming of Christ, and as he continues through the course of the short story, we see he's a doctor, and you find out that he's doing more and more miraculous things, and the media starting to take note of him, and people really, really like him. That Berry, who's his flatmate, who's also, and we learned he's only got one arm as well, that he lost his arm in an accident as a child, and as a result has always felt strangely inferior. He meets this woman who he's incredibly attracted to, and she says, I need to get close to your flatmate. Again, kind of seeing that we're going all in twists, you find out that it's not said explicitly, but it's made out that she is in some way the devil. Yes. Or that she is like an agent of the devil. We're told that she has a remarkable, like an enchanting birthmark on her, doesn't it? And she just says, look, and what I like about it is she says, they've got it all wrong. They want a world that can't be. And it can't be like this. And if they win, it's not what humanity's about. And you'll kind of, you'll continue to be enslaved. And I really loved that the first time I read it. I really loved not just the whole kind of, we are evil and we're going to get the second coming. I really like that whole notion of, well, maybe that's how you'd get into, kind of, you get next to him and get close to him by saying, you've got to realize you've been lied to. He's not going to be this force for good. It's a hoax. Well, not a hoax, but, it's a myth. And I just thought that was terrific. And then, of course, he buckles because...
To be fair, James, your explanation of it makes it sound much better than it actually is. Like,
okay.
I now want to read this story, but I've already read it and I didn't enjoy it.
Okay.
However, the way she wins them over is by saying, "I'll have sex with you."
Yeah.
Yeah.
What you were saying there, if there was more about him sort of like questioning what a world would be like if this actually happened, and also he asks when he realizes that Monu can, because he shows him, doesn't he? He shows him like the choir of angels and all that kind of stuff.
Like, the room fills with blinding light, we're told.
But
so
he
it's
asked him
me.
to heal his missing arm, and he won't do it. And I felt like those two things probably could have been enough for him to make the decision to betray him, but it feels like it's over reliant on her coming across as being really sexy.
Mm-hmm.
It's like thingy with Pete and Dud, isn't it? Bedazzled, when Raquel Welch is the devil. I think, is she the devil?
I don't know. I'm not aware of this.
Oh, it's a film.
Yeah,
called Bedazzled, and then it was remade with Liz Hurley and the guy from The Mummy, who's Brendan Fraser. But I can't. I think that's the overall context of that. What this story made me think was that it's basically the same story as the first story, where someone who's got too big for their boots is kind of taken down a peg or two by what I thought was angels or demons or whatever, and I thought they were basically the same content.
Interesting.
This one was more nostalgic, and this is the one that made me think much more of Paul Cornell's Doctor Who writing in the early 90s. That's to do with like these omnipotent figures of good and evil and stuff like that coming into human realms and kind of doing stuff.
This one did make me wish it was a longer story, and they could have done more. Yeah, I wanted to find out more about this.
Yeah, I mean, the ending is that he's basically chuffed that he's cocked it up for his mate.
Yes,
isn't he?
He's so
because
the pettiness.
What happens? She then seduces Molyneux at the end.
Yes,
is that what you're led to believe?
And we're told that he will lose his powers.
Yeah.
And I like that whole kind of the human thing of, oh, well, kind of screw the rest of humanity. I got one over on him. And even though I didn't feel like, I would do the same or anything like that, I just thought, I like that. It felt very true that, somehow people are that selfish and people will be that selfish.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
But your explanation is better than the story, James.
Oh,
okay?
thank you. Well, I said that
Jeremy, if you're listening.
But I found the same about most of the Hammer films. Us talking about particularly Satanic Rites of Dracula.
Oh.
Yeah.
So I was listening to that the other day, you moaning about how dirty London was, and I was like, what is wrong with you? Dirty, grim London.
Dull.
So the bit that I really like is the girl smiled. There was another lengthy pause before she responded. Thing is, Michael, your friend, he's got it all wrong. Got what all wrong? All. Everything. His people are acting on behalf of perfection. It's unnatural. We are only interested in preserving a delicate balance. So, just that whole... and I really loved that. And I think that was the first time I think that I'd ever kind of come across that in a story, that notion of, rather than that kind of Manichean terms of you've got light and darkness and one must be the dark and the other one must be the light. That whole notion of, well, maybe it wouldn't be good for us if there was some kind of savior figure. We do need that. That's what we need as a species. But anyway, that's what I took and ran from the story. And like I said, it stayed with me for years and years. And it's often one that when people are talking about kind of second coming stories and the like, up to and including Behold the Man by Michael Moorcock. Have you ever read that one?
No.
No.
Right. Okay, it's amazing. So it's a time travel story featuring a guy who is like, he's a Hebrew scholar and he's absolutely obsessed with Jesus and proving the existence of Jesus because, fact fans, we don't know for a fact that Jesus existed. So he gets friendly with a guy who's making an experimental time machine, and he says, look, you got to be aware, it's a one-way trip. You don't come back. You've got to go. Right? And he's like, okay, it's fine. I speak Aramaic. He's like a proper, biblical scholar and what have you. He's like, I speak Aramaic. It's my life's mission to meet Jesus and to know that this is true. He travels back in time. Oh, he's all disorientated. But, he's walking around Galilee and he's talking to people in Aramaic and he says, I'm after this guy. I'm after this carpenter. I'm after I'm after the son of Joseph.
He is Jesus.
I'm after the
is
son
he
of Joseph.
Jesus?
Correct. You've got it.
Yeah.
Well, he finds Jesus and finds out that he's a gibbering idiot. That he's just a fool. And then the realization that he has got to be Jesus. And that's how he knows that Judas will betray him. And that's how he knows what will happen to him. Because he knows the story. And it's like the horrible realization that he's got to be Jesus. That's a great shit. If you've never read it, it's really good.
I do like the sound of that.
I'll spoil it for you, but it's good. It's not long. Michael Moorcock. Behold them.
There was a series called The Flip Side of Dominic Hyde.
Oh.
In the 80s. I don't think it was a series. I think it was two. I think it was like a special one-off and then a sequel. And it's a guy from the future that turns out to be his own grandfather or great-grandfather, something like that. Because he comes back in time, meets Caroline Langrish, has an affair with her, who can blame him? And then basically he finds out that he is his own forefather or whatever. I like any time travel thing like that, really. And Doctor Who hasn't done that very often, has it? If at all, really, where
the Doctor is his own father.
Yeah, that kind of thing. Maybe they'll try that in the next series. Who knows?
They didn't do it on Spearhead from Space, did they?
Maybe the Doctor's penis was the spearhead from space.
What they did do is film it totally on 16mm.
John Pertwee's penis would look amazing on 16mm film.
You can see his tattoo if you look closely in that.
Was it the HMS Hood?
Right? He was on the HMS Hood when it was sunk, I think. And I think did he not have a Rolls Royce or something on the deck?
I don't know. But John Pertwee is in the last issue of the 14 Times about a weird ghost spirit thing, which he sort of, which made him piss his pants. That's a word for which made me subscribe to the 14 Times, which for more John Pertwee piss pant stories.
He
wonderful scene.
I'm sure he used to present a program called I've Seen a Ghost, where he interviewed people about I piss my pants with John Pertwee. Not with John Pertwee.
Pert weed my pants.
You've missed the career, Ross, as a tabloid headline writer.
Yeah.
So there was a couple of other stories in here which I would recommend, John. I think that I would recommend for you to read one called A Last Look at the Sea.
Oh God, that sounds miserable.
A couple who they found an old sort of guidebook of out of the way hotels to go and stay at. And they go to one in Cornwall, and in the middle of the night he wakes up and he feels a real urge to propose to his girlfriend, but he chickens out and doesn't do it. And then they're told by a guy in the bar that every so often there's a thing called the wash, I think, where the tide goes out a really, really far way, really long way. This
is really like Ringing the Changes by Robert Aikman at the moment.
And there's the fog, and they said if you go through the fog, you'll see something more beautiful than you're ever going to see. But the man and his the girl he's in love with go down there, and the wash goes out, and she goes through the fog, but he's too scared to go out because once he goes through that, apparently it just looks so. The sea has just disappeared, and it's just like such an expanse of space. And he's got agoraphobia or something like that, and he's too scared to go out, and he sees her in the distance bend down and dig something out of the ground, and she's trying to get him to come over to look at it, but he's too scared to go and do it. And he runs away, and when he comes back, she comes back, but she never tells him what she saw. And then their relationship breaks down, and then they never get married or never do anything after that point. And it's just really evocative, and it feels like that kind of story which I feel like you've talked about in the past, which you like. But there's also that whole idea of like you never know what that was. But is it a metaphor that he never took that step?
Yeah. It sounds like a mix of Whistle and I'll Come to You and Ringing the Changes by Robert Aikman, where in Ringing the Changes, a couple go to a seaside town for their honeymoon, an older man and his younger wife. little do they know that it's a annual festival where the dead come back from the sea.
Nice.
And it's all night bells are ringing, and it's to do with waking the dead. And then the dead come into the town and take his wife away, and she comes back the next morning, a very different woman. It's a very strange story, but it does sound very similar to that.
That sounds cool. I'd like to read
That's a good. It's a good
the-
Robert Aikman one, because some of Robert Aikman's are just rubbish. They're like Amicus horror films. They're just nonsensical and they make no sense, and then they finish and you're like, there's one where where the main girl is a character, the main character is a girl, walks up a hill, sees these miniature people, sees some people in the stone circle, goes home, and then the story finishes. And it's just
I believe
anyone can make this up.
I believe that's what Jamie Dyson's working on at the moment, is doing Robert Aikman adaptations for television.
Wow. It all
Okay.
ties together beautifully. I did not know that.
Interesting.
I believe that's right. I might have that completely wrong, but that's
Mark Gatiss has done has made Ringing the Changes for Radio 4 with, I think it was George Baker as the main guy. I can't remember what.
As an Inspector Wexford, George.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
so that might be available on the iPlayer if our listeners want to go and check that out. It's quite a good one. It's about half an hour, but it's slightly different to the story.
Another good one in this book is called The Maze. And there's it's a guy he's got a memory of there being a maze in the park which he goes to as a child. And he always remembers him going there with his mother, and his mother's died, but he's trying to get his sister to remember it. But he doesn't want to outright say, "Can you remember the maze?" And she can't seem to remember it. He's talking to his sister's husband, and he can't remember it. He talks to his dad, who's had a stroke, and it looks like he's got some kind of memory, but he can't bring it out. So then he goes to the park, and he can't find. And it's like he said, I can remember going to this part of the park, but then I've got no memory how I got from there to the maze. So he can't find it there. So then he goes to the library just before it's going to close, and they take him to the local history part, and then they show him some stuff, and he finds on a map like a shape. There's a shape on the map of what it could be where the maze is, and he says to the woman, the librarian, who's got some missing fingers. And he's saying, and he's trying not to look at her shiny stumps.
This is weird. Like an armless man, a woman without fingers.
Yeah, amputee.
And she said, "Where is it? I need to see some." And she gives him a card with like one of those sort of what's it called? The numbers in a library. The
Oh, yeah.
The Dewey Decimals.
The Dewey Decimals.
Yeah.
Of a number. And they said the library's going to shut soon, but she shows him down a corridor.
Possess all.
Yeah, possess all. And there's some doors with these numbers on, and he goes through the door with a number on the card, and the maze is in that room. But it's all like all the leaves are dead, but the room's big enough to have this maze in it, and he goes in the maze to try and go to the centre where his mother always to take him to the centre. But as he gets to the centre, you can hear someone locking the door behind him, and that was I really liked that. That was a good story.
That sounds very M.R. James again. I think what he does, and this is what I do, but I don't finish writing them or indeed ever publish them, is that maybe his stories are like very obvious love letters to his kind of favourite influences and stuff. Because there's Mr. Humphrey's Inheritance, I think that one is. There's a maze in that where the guy, it's quite a convoluted story, but he draws a map of it for a lady who wants to find the centre of the maze, who's doing a book about mazes, and then a blob of ink falls onto the page, and then as he looks, the hole, it becomes a hole and gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and then a burnt figure comes out of it, out of the map, and it transpires that is, I think that's his uncle who was cremated or something.
Right.
It's a really weird story. It's makes you think he was on opium, but I don't think he was.
There are some other good stories, and there's the
250,000
clearances.
Giveaway.
Yeah.
Do you remember there in the sort of the
Yes.
90s? There were these
Yes.
scams where they was like, "Oh, come in here. You can get like a Sony camcorder for 50 quid," and they'd make everyone come into the room. Then they would shut the doors and then like really intimidate you to bid on something, and you come out with a bag of a load of shit. Do you remember that was like a scam?
No.
Yeah, well, yeah, living in London in the 90s, you would see this, like a big sign saying electrical sale this way,
Yeah.
off of sort of side streets, off of Oxford Street, kind of what now the hipsters would describe as a pop-up shop.
Yeah.
Basically just an abandoned shop they'd taken over. And as Ross says, that, it was clear, even from my kind of naive, wet behind the ears boy from Dorset way, I was like, you're not going to get anything legit out of going in there. And, but yes.
And reading the other book, What Happens Now, there's a lot of what would I have done if I was in the Holocaust, basically. It's what would I have stood up to these people? Would I have had the courage to fight back? This story, and in that book as well, I think there's people put into situations where there are bullies and there's people trying to intimidate you, people who are picking on you from where you're from and who you are, and it's just like that fear that I can't make a scene or I'm too weak to stand up to these people, and just being in that horrible situation where you feel like I've got no power, but actually if you did just stand up and say I'm leaving here, I can walk out of this place where they're trying to make me pay £5 for an electric screwdriver or whatever was in there. There's been points in my life growing up where there have been bullies or people who are trying to put power over you, and you feel like that all I need to do is say no or stop and this will stop happening, but I'm too scared to do that. I'm in very much a position where I'm a white British male I'm not from any minority. I'm in a position of privilege. For example, maybe figure we went to Egypt, me and Beck went to Egypt, and there was a lot of times where people were trying to get us to pay the money to do. So for example, we went to the Valley of the Kings, and there was a point where we was the only ones in a tomb with an Egyptian guide, and he was like, he sort of like, come this way. And he was like, come, and he lifted up the rope, and there, in one of the tombs there was a sarcophagus still there, and he said, get in it. And he allowed me to lay in the sarcophagus.
You've never told me this, Ross.
Get in it.
Why did you think it was a good idea to do that?
Because I feel, I got... but unlike Alistair Crowley, it's one of those things where when else am I going to say it? I laid in a sarcophagus in the Valley of the Kings, and you could see, and they had like the lid of the sarcophagus suspended over, and you could see all the paintings on the inside of the sarcophagus, which you wouldn't have seen otherwise. So I did this, and obviously he wanted me to do that so I could bung him some money, so I gave him that. Yeah. And then he tried to get me and Beck to go down this tunnel, which had a massive fucking hole in the ground, which you couldn't see to the bottom. And I was going, I'm not going down there. I'm not going down there. And he was going, come. It's okay. And I was like, I'm not going down this dark tunnel where you had to inch around the edge. But we went to another temple where, again, we was on our own, and a soldier came up to us, and he was going, come. And he sort of took us off to this bit, and he was showing us, he was like, scarab, understand? And he showed us where someone had carved a scarab into the wall. And then he took us further up into this place where you past the rope where you weren't meant to go. And there's someone had carved a penis into the wall, and he was like, understand? And we was like, yeah. Very funny. And he took us right up to the top of this, all these steps into this thing. And
he would have gone on you and said, understand.
But basically, he did. He stood up and he went, cash. And I said, I haven't got any money. And he was like, cash, money. And I was like, I haven't got any money. And he stood in front of the door, and he held a machine gun up in front of us, and he went, cash, like this. And I was saying to Beck that my kind of white entitlement is like, I meant, you're not going to shoot me. You can't.
Excuse me, sir.
You can't shoot me.
I'll have you know that I'll have someone from the British consulate here in under 5 minutes.
Yeah, and I was like, you will not shoot me. You cannot shoot me. And I just walked past and pushed my way past this guy. And afterwards, I suddenly had that realization. I was taken way away from all of these people, and this Egyptian soldier was pointing a machine gun at me, and I was like, but there's no way that anyone's going to do anything to me. Yeah, it's really easy to have that point of view when you're thinking of certain circumstances, and I think that some of the things which come across in some of these stories, it's like I am not a Jewish man who has all of what happened to by people within generations behind me, and also all the anti-Semitism I may have experienced growing up. A lot of that comes across in some of these stories as well. That whole thing of like, when I'm talking about like that fear of indecision, it's not just about personal relationships. It comes across. So there's a story later on where at last, where guys at home, people start banging on the doors, and there's all people outside. You can hear them chanting, and his thought is that shit. The Holocaust is happening again. They're coming for us. You know, they're coming for, and there's all the Jewish people are panicking. But it turns out that they're actually all, James, how would you describe it? They're kind of like almost
it's
like
the day of the Last Judgment, isn't it? Frankly,
and it's a good thing that's happening, but because they're also frightened because they've had this thing in the past which has happened to them, they're too scared to come out. And that's one of the great things about art and especially about literature, is that it does allow you to have a degree of empathy and get you to see the world from somebody else's perspective. Right? So we're all talking from a position of privilege, but getting to see how other people live and how other people have experienced things, that's surely part of the value of art, and why art should always be valued in any culture. That's my very Ponzi 5 minutes. Well, I think you're right, and also I think one of the good things about us doing this, I think that there is so much stuff out there. There's so many books, and I'm someone who has a quite big anxiety about that. There's loads of stuff out there which I need to consume because and I feel like I consume it too quickly to actually take in a lot of this stuff.
You don't savor it.
I think you do, Cleves.
Yeah, and I feel like I've really loved reading stuff and watching stuff with you guys because it's allowed me to think about it and talk about it afterwards and actually
slow it down
and find stuff in there which may not have been put in there or it was there and I've completely missed, and it's made me enjoy it and think about it to a much deeper
greater
level.
extent.
Yeah, so thank you.
Cool. Well done, everyone.
Well done. So, would we recommend this, and what are the scores? So, James, would you like to start off?
Yeah.
Well,
let's start on a positive.
So, even though, and I do really appreciate what you guys said about the kind of the 90s or the late 90s factor, and also I think Ross, you're absolutely on the money about kind of stories about people and indecision and fear of making a decision one way or the other. 100% agree with that. But then at the same time, that, I loved it at the time and I really enjoyed just revisiting those stories again. And I really enjoy Jeremy Dyson. I think he's an excellent writer. I really like him. And also, I'm a huge fan of ghost stories as well. Kind of seeing ghost stories in when it first appeared on stage was just a magical evening. And thanks to Ross, because that was Ross's. That was my 30th birthday present from Ross back in there, and it was amazing. So for all of those things, for the first time on General Witchfinders, it gets a 5.
Well.
There you
John, so you can't go below 0.
Oh, really?
Oh, you can if you want to.
I wouldn't go as low as for the rats.
Come on.
I would recommend, exactly. I would recommend it to people. For me, it's probably a 2.
Or a 2, okay. Considering you give everything else a 4 or a 5, I think that's, apart from the rats, I think that's a...
I did give the rats a -10 or something.
I think you did, yes, okay. But I would recommend, John...
I will read the others. I mean, this, as I said, this is me out of my comfort zone, where, to be fair, James has been out of his comfort zone most weeks with the stuff that we've looked at. And I think that... I just think that maybe it's the settings, or maybe it's a modern setting, something that doesn't really grip me in the same way. Someone going to visit Los Angeles and going on a plane, or someone going to visit an Eastern European prostitute. It just feels a bit too modern for me. I just like a bit more gothic kind of nonsense, really, or Victoriana.
And I think that's cool. That's the beauty of General Witchfinders. Is I think that we all like, we all come at things.
If we all like the same thing, it would be very boring.
It'd be boring. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, I'm going to give this a 4, I think.
Hey!
It's not as good as I remember because I feel like it's aged a little bit, but maybe it's more I've aged rather than the book has.
Yeah.
It's made me want to go back and read is it the Cranes that Cranes built, and is that right, James? And the Haunted Book, because there's a couple of stories in there which really stick in my mind as well. And I really like what the Haunted Book did towards the end, how it became very sort of meta, and and as reading the book, I was just going to say, why are the last third of the book in different color pages? And it was really exciting to find out what was happening as I got to that point.
That's I always think of Danielewski's House of Leaves. If you've ever read that book,
I really tried to read that book. You lent it to me before.
I did, and
it got to the point where it was like, I'm about 5 levels in now, and there's way too much sex in this book at this point.
Recurring theme, Ross.
I can only read so much sex.
So much sex.
Now got on to something horrific, something which we would like to recommend since the last time we did a podcast. Has anyone got anything this week?
I watched the second half of Nosferatu.
Okay, which is going to make no sense because we're recording these 2 episodes out of order. So refer to the first part of this in 2 weeks' time. But John, how did you find the second half of Nosferatu?
Well, the second half. So I watched the second half first, obviously, because that's how you watch films. It's good. It's a good film. It's very weird. It's very slow. Klaus Kinski is almost humorous in it. I don't know if he's meant to be particularly, but he comes across as being absolutely ridiculous. But then the ending is very odd. And I think a bit of a kind of inspiration for the kind of Mark Gatiss, Stephen Moffat kind of retread of Dracula, where you find out that Jonathan has become a vampire himself on the death of Dracula, and the end of him is at the end of the film is him asking for a horse and saying something like, "I have lots to do," and then he just buggers off into the sunset, and the film finishes after his wife has killed herself trying to save his life. So it's a weird retread where the ending changes, but it is a very interesting bit of filmmaking, and there's some really interesting set pieces in it. But it's not set pieces that you think in terms of like action or drama. It's like weird shots of loads and loads of rats for like 10 minutes. Or like a really, really high up shot looking down onto the town square where there's just loads of men carrying coffins through the town square because Dracula's brought the plague to the city. My
only memory of this film is from a child of like either the cock crowing or the bell ringing and the vampire running home. Does that happen?
No.
No? Okay, so I don't know.
She seduces him to keep him in her bedchamber until first cockcrow, and then he looks out the window and the sunlight kills him. That's very hard to say for some reason. But it's very... The way it kind of pays homage to silent film is very interesting. Isabella Gianni, I'm going to check that it is her before I'm shot down by no one. I don't want our first ever complaint to be that I have got the name of someone wrong. Isabella Gianni, yeah. So Isabella Gianni looks absolutely amazing in it, and she looks very, very like a silent cinema kind of heroine in it.
So apparently, I think the guy who made The Witch and The Lighthouse is remaking Nosferatu, but
he's doing He's doing this Viking thing next, isn't he?
Right, okay. Because I'm sure I'm trying to find, because I saw that somewhere and I'm trying to find proof of that on the internet, but
this might have been a funny Ross dream because he's definitely doing this Viking thing next, I'm sure.
But I enjoyed it very much. It's not a rollicking romp, but it is a piece of very kind of solid European. I wouldn't call it horror. There's nothing horrific in it at all. There's very, very little blood, but it is a very beautiful looking film, which is really beautifully shot. And that's enough for me.
If people would like to have a quick look at the General Witchfinders Twitter feed, you'll see, or maybe whoever out of you two is in charge of it at the moment might want to retweet the article. But there was a great article in The Guardian that basically highlighted saying the rise of the horror podcast.
Simon sent me this. I haven't read it yet. There you go.
And right, it's very, very good, and it talks about what the BBC. It talks about our friend Julian Sampson, who did all the reworked H.P. Lovecraft ones that we've kind of talked about at length. Shadow over Innsmouth, all of that, which has been fantastic.
They didn't speak to us though, did they?
Oh, and then they also talk about the Battersea Poltergeist as well, which is something. And so I was okay. And then it said, but, this is just, and those are just the BBC ones. At the moment, there is an absolute kind of rising stock in sort of next generation horror podcasts. And they then listed some. And I thought, wow, all right, okay. I'll take a listen. And so far, because it was only at the start of this week that these were listed. And I listened to two. I listened to the left-right game to start off with,
right? Which
I wasn't massively enamored with. It's clearly very expensively done. It's got Tessa Thompson in it, who you might know. She was people probably know as Valkyrie from Thor and the last two Avengers movie. John doesn't, obviously, but she's been in lots of good stuff. Tessa Thompson.
She was in Westworld.
And she was in Westworld as well. Yes, she's in Westworld.
She in anything with Peter Cushing?
Not yet. Not until they do some sort of time travel films. But anyway, but with that, it is kind of sponsored by Sonos. Sort of like halfway through the episodes, you have an unskippable ad going, "Hello, I'm one of the sound designers of this episode, and we've designed this to be played on Sonos equipment. The wonderful thing about Sonos equipment." And and it really takes you out of the story, and you think, once again, God bless the BBC that I don't have to learn some of this shit the whole time.
Yeah.
So I have to say, and also the premise behind it, I found to be not amazing, not fantastic, but I did enjoy Alice Isn't Dead from Night Vale Presents podcasts, which is very, very good. It starts off, it's all about, it's this woman it's that kind of nice podcast thing that they do these days. So people saying, well, I'm either recording my memoirs or I'm recording this, I'm doing this for the purposes of an article or something like that. So it gives you that feeling of verisimilitude that you've stumbled upon somebody's kind of tapes of their lives and things such as that. And it's a woman who's, she's a trucker in the States, and kind of trucks, those huge kind of endless highways of, and kind of interstates in the middle of America. And in episode number 1, something quite freaky and quite disturbing happens. And I thought, oh, that was surprisingly good.
Okay.
So I really enjoyed episode 1 of that. And I'm going to see where it goes. So yes, that's Alice Isn't Dead.
I will be listening to that. That sounds good.
Wherever you get your podcasts. They like to say.
I'm talking about Servant on Apple TV.
Okay.
Just finished series 2 of Servant. This is produced by M. Night Shyamalan.
Ding dong.
The premise of this is a rich family in an amazing, beautiful house in brownstone sort of type house in Boston. She is a news reporter for the local news. He is he's like a consultant chef. Like, he will go to like the top restaurants and he will help develop their menus for them. So he's played by the guy who was sort of the disabled brother in Dead Man's Shoes, and he was also the ape out of
Toby Kebbell.
Yes,
yeah, brilliant.
Yes.
He's really good in it. She's played by the redhead girl out of 6 Feet Under. I can't remember. Anyway, and her brother is Rupert Grint from Harry Potter fame.
From the Potter. Yeah.
And Rupert Grint, he is incredible in it. He's brilliant, really, really funny. just really good, amazing performance of Rupert Grint. It's completely made me look at him in a different light. But the premise of the stories is that they hire a nanny into the house, and when the nanny gets there, the baby is a dummy. It's a fake baby, and the dad takes us to one side and says, "Look, the baby has died, and part of her therapy is that because she hasn't accepted that he's died, that we're using this dummy as a therapy thing to get her to come to terms with the idea that the baby's no longer here." And at the end of the first episode, you hear a baby crying, and they go in there, and there's the nanny who's a young 17-year-old girl. She's holding the baby, and at no point does she acknowledge that it's a dummy. And then it's like, okay, well, what's happened? Is it something supernatural? Has she brought the baby back? Has she got a baby which she's come and she's replaced that baby with? Where has she come from? What's it all about? So that's kind of like in series 1, and now series 2, it goes a little bit further, and I don't want to spoil anything for anyone, and I feel like series 2 has been obviously part of COVID filming, so it's nearly all inside this house, and no one's going outside or anything. But just saying, series 2, the dummy's back, and they lock this girl up in the loft.
Dummy's back. Is that the strap line?
The dummy's back. Yeah, I mean, it's like you've got to bring the baby back, and it goes a little bit lost. And then you find out about this weird cult which this girl's come from, and they got like Betamax tapes where they're talking about these which has got like guides of how to do a certain ceremony and it's kind of black magic-y, but it's also
nice.
It's not one of Zach Bagans' haunted dolls, is it? Peggy the doll.
I'd highly recommend it.
Robert the doll.
I think there's 10 episodes in each series, and it's one of those ones where when you're coming up to the end of the series, you're really excited that it's coming to an end because you know something really cool is going to happen, but also you're really fucked off because it's going to be a cliffhanger, and you're going to have to wait.
That's why I will never watch it. It just goes on forever. 2
series in, I don't know why it's called Servant, and it's what I feel like. Okay, where is this going? Who is the servant in this story?
Who is the servant?
Okay, so
well done, everyone.
Thank you very much for listening tonight for something a little bit different from our usual
film-centric.
I'm more cerebral.
A more cerebral evening.
Yeah.
Whichever Witchfinders.
Less laughs, more neuroses. And next week we will be bringing you Deathline, or AKA Raw Meat. But until then,
mind the gap.
Mind the
doors.
Mind the doors. And so goodbye from me. Happy day.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Stay safe.
Love, light, and peace.
You have been listening to The General Witchfinders. Support the show and continue the conversation at patreon.com/General Witchfinders. Subscribe and spread the word at generalwitchfinders.com. Farewell, and don't have nightmares.